Just to kind of remind everybody, 2 weeks ago, we began discussing this book by Naomi Klein called No Logo. In part one, there are 5 chapters. We talked about the first 2. The prevailing theme in this part is how public space has been captured by international companies to promote their brands and push their products essentially. And today we'll start by talking about chapter 3 first, and then move on to the fourth and fifth. To kind of give a brief summary of chapter 3 for those who haven't had the opportunity to read it, the author basically demonstrates in the chapter how many youth movements in North America, like in the USA and Canada, were co-opted by international companies, and basically turning youth culture into a marketable culture. Brands, I mean, not brands, but companies figured out that if they can harness that, power young people have, they can sell more products, they can create new brands. The buzzwords, the keywords during that time were, being cool, authentic, rebellious, etc. Okay. And obviously, the book was written, I think the first edition in 2000 and the second one in 2010. So a lot maybe has changed or has not since then. But I feel that this particular this particular feeling of being cool has not really disappeared. Like it still exists in marketing today, in branding, especially with the rise of influencers and social media personalities and such. Okay, so before I ask you guys a few questions about this, would anybody like to comment on chapter 3? And does anybody have any particular reflections to share with the group?
Assalamu alaikum. I'll just add a small thing that I observed while reading this chapter, and that's how she started, the writer started the chapter, narrating about herself and her life in high school. So it was a short paragraph. But also, that's where I realized, like, okay, so I thought she would go into depth about, psychology, about youth psychology or human psychology in general, because that's the what well that's the impression I got, that is what influences what um, teenagers or the youth react the way they react, and how they how they tend to feel what she termed as the teenage narcissism and all this. She did touch on it, but there wasn't much about psychology in her book so far, which I thought would have been very interesting take, I guess.
You are absolutely right. So far, that has not really been the focus of the book. Chapter 3 was more about the tactics companies used to create brands, using youth culture, using hip hop culture, alternative cultures, etc. So, which I don't really find particularly interesting to repeat here. I don't think it's particularly relevant. But yeah, it's a good point, Samira. There wasn't much discussion about that for sure.
Personally, I found interesting the shift, the focus on the youth, and it's really been since the 80s or 90s, as she mentioned, right, where brands started to shift. And I feel like it's not just about branding, but everything has shifted to the youth, because she gave an interesting comparison between, the shift from the targeting of baby boomers and their duties and their approaches to their parents and so on. And just 2 days ago, we had this workshop at the university on how teaching innovations for Gen Z and so on. And you really see this obsession, how can we as much as possible influence the young generation, and how should we approach them? Everything is really catering to them, you know. And I feel that there's this a shift than before. Maybe it's due to some social economic conditions where the previous generations, in you know, when they were this young, like really all they focused on was somehow, you know, helping the family or something. But nowadays, maybe due to the independence, or like for the last 30 years of the younger generations and trying to, you know, become independent at a younger age, it's now like a free prey that you can just capture. You know, like the shift from the household needs to be accommodated by another predator or something like that. It feels like that's the approach that they have towards the youth, right? Instead of mm, cultivating, instead of raising youth that has some benefit for the society, it's just like, how can I replace the family? How can I replace what was their previous, right? Like now there are these wandering lost people, and I need to be the one who catches them, right? And it seems like it's not just in branding, but it's in every area, in entertainment, in social media, in education. You know, like we have these young independent people who have not yet been stained too much. So how can I make them part of my movement, part of my brand, part of my, you know, understanding, part of my whatever, right? So that seemed interesting as a shift in the last 30 years to what we have previously known as humanity, probably.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it is like the big fight for the heart and soul of young people in general, especially now. I mean, I really detest opening Instagram or TikTok, or these platforms, seeing these influencers with their, you know, mindless content, just, you know, promoting these big corporations and brands. And then unfortunately, a lot of the youth have been captivated by that. And I feel that, I mean, we are kind of digressing, I suppose, but I feel that the intellectual capabilities of our children have deteriorated in the last, I don't know, 15 years, 10 years. I can't give an exact number, because we're just, oh, was I cut off? Anyway,
No, I can hear you well.
okay, great. Great. Yeah, I mean, I feel that we're just creating consumers, not really critical thinkers, and that's really the sad part of it. And even like whenever you see some kind of subculture, um, alternative culture, whatever, like you can expect Nike or I don't know, Adidas or some of these brands to co-opt it and make a buck out of it. So nothing feels genuine anymore. And I feel that a lot of young people have become, you know, not necessarily nihilistic, but pretty disappointed in what is out there. So yeah, I mean, it doesn't really look very bright um, for our children in terms of how they can engage with the public space, right?
When I was talking about how, as brands started, focusing on shift. First, it started with shifting from production to branding, and now brands are trying to pretty much entrench their tentacles on every surface, every channel, every. That's the whole point of No Space. And then once they have covered pretty much all the institutions, they want to get into the minds of the next generation. They don't want to sell habits any longer. They want to build them. They want to create them. They are constantly looking for new surfaces, new channels to develop thinking, create habits, even when there's something new, something authentic. Like, for example, TikTok is considered, I think she said in the book, TikTok is considered some kind of rebellion, but brands have co-opted as starting making memes, being in on the jokes, and the kids of this generation are just being pretty much being given devices, electronics, and just left to fend for themselves against all these tactics and all these new strategies. And these brands aren't amateurs; they're hiring like child psychologists. They're hiring, like, even if it's not mentioned in the book, they are. The methods they use are probably more wicked than we could possibly imagine, and it's so important that we help defend our kids against this stuff. And I think that's why this book is so important, because if we can learn how to start with ourselves, I think we can pass it on to our children.
Thank you, brother. Kareem, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, just to add on to the point, exactly because now Brother Abdurrahman, he mentioned, kids, right? Like where she's coming from, she's talking about high school campuses and then about academia, but you see the barrier keeps on lowering and lowering, right? And like as I tried to highlight, like 15 minutes ago or 10 minutes ago, the individuality or the release from the household was at like, becoming a teenager and so on. But now you feel that the barrier of disassociating from your family is, around 7, 8 years. And so you can feel like the capture is being done much earlier than it used to be. Right. So where will it go next, right? Like, how much will the lowering of the age of control by external factors go to, right? So it just seemed interesting. Like when she said, when talking about products and production and so on, you are targeting basically people who are using these products, right? Which are going to be probably adults. Like you're not going to be targeting youth, right? Then it started with the branding and so on. So you're now targeting younger generations, right? And now with what we know, you are targeting kids, right? And they have their own languages and they have their own spaces and their own ways. Like so many parents who have completely disassociated from their own kids in understanding and whatnot, just because of this phenomenon, I feel, right? So it's kind of crazy.
No, absolutely, absolutely, and it's perhaps a fitting topic of a sci-fi novel or something, right? The future of it all. I see that Ustad Shahid is here now. I hope the connection is better. Ustad, would you like to say a few words about this?
Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
Wa alaikum salam. We can hear you quite well. Yeah.
Alhamdulillah. I mean, there's a few things. As you can see, I've been having some technical problems on my end, so I've been kind of in and out of the conversation. I'm not catching everything that's been said, everything that's been covered so far. But I think that, it all has to be taken within the overall. I think Brother Kareem was talking about the overall sort of socioeconomic context of the United States specifically over the last 30, 40 years. And I think that, for example, I think you have to look at how excuse me, how corporations themselves have developed during that period, during the last 40 years, the levels that they've reached in terms of their monopolization and their conglomeration. Then you have to look at the entry of young people into the workforce at a much younger age, meaning that they have some degree of disposable income. I think that reached maybe a high peak in the early 1980s, and then it has become normal for young people to have money to spend. And then you have the fact of the emergence of the necessity of the two-income household for even the households where they have the two parents living at home, which also was in steep decline during that period. But uh, even you can put that together because you have to have the two incomes, which means less attention being given to the children, a severing of the relationship between family members, and then also the same will apply when you're talking about a single parent who has to work, even harder and probably barely sees their kid. And this is when we talk about Gen X, my generation, which is the generation I think also Naomi Klein and mostly the generation that she's talking about when all of this emerged. We're sort of famous as being the generation that raised itself, the generation that really didn't have much oversight from parents and so on. So we really were sort of just out in the world, and the corporations had perfected their model. They had monopolized their model very well, streamlined it, and at the same time, you're seeing the technology boom and the boom of cable television and all of these other means of reaching young populations and delivering these messages to them and so forth. All of these things combine together to create sort of this culture and this new way. And then also you add to that, so-called globalization with the container shipping and so on, and the outsourcing and the cheap manufacturing, and you're able to produce more goods than anyone actually needs. So you have to find some way to market it and someone to market it to. And so you come up with the whole branding scheme to create value in things that no one needs based on the prestige or the fashionableness of the brand itself. And from the beginning, this is an appeal that would only really work for very young, gullible, foolish young people. the older generation, the baby boom generation, whatever, my parents' generation, they were still raised on practicality. They were still raised on you buy things because you need them, because they have some utility to you. But when you're young and you have some money because you're working, you're more inclined to buy things just because you're able to do that, and it has some kind of a brand appeal, a prestige appeal, a fashion appeal, a coolness appeal, and they also were able to see that young people are struggling with defining their identities, and so the corporations decided, well, we can actually help determine what your identity is going to be, and we'll tap into that lack of a fully formed identity so that we can easily deliver to you the lifestyle that a young person thinks is cool and thinks that this is a very easy sort of bumper sticker way of letting the world know who you are and what you stand for and so on. So it's incredibly predatory and incredibly manipulative, and it's literally going after, in those days and now, as you said, the age is going even younger and younger. You're literally going after the most vulnerable and not fully formed people in terms of their psyche, in terms of their identity, in terms of who they are and their concept of themselves. You're going after those people because they're the most vulnerable market that you can go after. And then, of course, obviously, the logic is that once we have established the brand loyalty, we'll have them once they become adults and have even more, potentially extra money to spend, disposable income, and so forth. I mean, you put it all together, and it's the whole logic of the system just at play, and you have to recognize that you can't help but recognize how predatory the whole internal logic is. It's not necessarily, anyone sitting around deciding that we're going to just be evil, but the whole internal logic of the system is playing out before your eyes, and you can see it's everyone making decisions that make sense within the context of the system, within the prevailing logic of the system, and the result is, simply catastrophic. I mean, I remember also in the early days, like when I was a teenager or in my early 20s, high school, college age, or what have you, say in the early 90s, uh, we detested anyone who became who took a sponsorship deal, an endorsement deal. We detested anyone who did this kind of thing and who was always selling and who appeared in advertisements. We always used the term shill. This is a shill. You're a sellout to the corporations and so on. Now you're an influencer. That's what you call an influencer. Like you said, you can't open any of these apps, Instagram or TikTok or any of them, except that everybody is hawking something. Everybody is a shill for some corporation, for some brand, for some new product that nobody needs. Like you've now created this whole, at this point we're talking about at least 2, 3 generations of people who are what we used to call complete sellouts. It's quite remarkable the way that has shifted from 30 years ago to today. You like it used to be that if you were a shill, you would not have an audience because you lost all credibility in front of the public, in front of young people. You would have lost all credibility. But now it's almost as if you don't have credibility unless you're doing some kind of an endorsement.
Absolutely, and I mean the culture that has emerged is I don't know how to describe it because I mean absolutely dangerous to how we develop our societies and what values we attach, right, to the future generations. Brother Kareem, I saw you raise your hand at some point, and I do want to make another point very quickly. So I do not want to disappoint anybody listening, but our speakers come from the Middle Nation Book Club, so we will not be accepting any invites to speak. It is really nothing personal. It is just the policy of the book club. So, Kareem, the mic is yours, hopefully.
Yeah, just interesting with the shilling aspect, like Arnold Schwarzenegger. I know he, like actors and these kind of people, had to go basically to untapped markets, in China and so on, and go in their advertisements just not to be seen by the youngs in America, right? Like they're not exposed as being a shill in an advertisement or something, like it went to that extent that they had to basically hide themselves from being seen making advertisements for some company or for some logo and so on. So that really has shifted. Also, what is interesting, I feel nowadays, is that instead of the focus on selling the product somehow. Like, of course, it's there. I'm not, diminishing the aspect of advertising and branding and whatnot, but I feel like it has shifted into like, like how can we make people buy more, right? That was always the idea, and the idea was like, let's make it more attractive for them to buy more. But now it seems that it is as if it has shifted to, for people to buy more, they need to have more money, basically. So let us target, this psychological aspect. Like, let us, keep grinding, keep being successful. Like, if you haven't managed, like, if you haven't had 5 companies under your management in your 20s, then you're completely lost case, right? All of these aspects, like, it's completely targeting the youth aspect of trying to be successful, trying to, this rat race, right? Trying to, it's really not about trying to distinguish the brands from each other, I feel, as much as trying to, whatever, if they have more money, they can buy all the brands more, right? So let us just try to hype them to be, to give up any sort of values, and just like, let us just create business people. Everyone needs to be a business person. Everyone needs to run their own business. Everybody needs to, stack up. Yeah, so I just feel that in the last 5 to 10 years, maybe last really 5, this extremely, this extreme emphasis like on being hyper successful and so on seems to have been the case of propagating somehow. At least that's my personal feeling of what is being pushed by the narrative. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's also the definition of what success is, because what you're really talking about, like I said in a recent talk, for Americans, you're basically just a conduit for money that goes from the company that you're working for out to all of the companies that you buy from, and you don't really keep any of it. It all goes out. And so it became a thing where you're basically bragging about my slave master is better than your slave master. The slave master that I'm a slave for is better and more prestigious than the slave master that you work for, because my slave master is whatever, Gucci, or I don't even know the names, Louis Vuitton or what have you. That's where all of my money is going. So even the definition of success is the ability to consume at absurd costs, to be able to have more money that you can waste on things that you don't need, rather than you building or creating anything, or being particularly good at anything, having any expertise in anything, having any knowledge about anything. It's that I am able to earn enough money to give over to my slave master, and my slave master is better than yours.
So I suppose the question arises then. I mean, we talk about how the youth have been captured in one way or another, in different parts of the world. What is the path for our, teenagers, children, etc., to be true rebels? And I don't mean rebels, in a violent kind of way, but just to resist that culture that glorifies so-called productivity, consumerism, and so on. I mean, what are the paths that they can take, and how can they resist that, if it is possible at all?
I don't think it will surprise anyone that my prognosis for the West and for young people in the West is not particularly good. I think that your condition is chronic and ultimately fatal. I don't really see a way, not because there isn't a way, but because you don't have the ingredients that are required to do what is necessary for you to do in the West. I think for young people in the global South, young people in the Muslim world, even probably to one extent or another, young people in Eastern Europe, they have some options, because first of all, they're not as infected uh, by the rot of this shillism and this consumerism, this really consumerism, this slavery to brands and so on. It's not as bad in other parts of the world as it is in the West, and particularly in the United States. But uh, what needs to be done is to disconnect from all of this and to start uh, determining yourself independently what has value, and basing that judgment upon quality, not upon the social capital that is um, attributed to something because of its brand, because of its branding, because of its reputation, or what have you. You actually decide what you're going to buy on the basis of the actual quality of the item. Um, and this is what I mean. The ingredients for that just aren't there, because this whole concept is completely foreign at this point. You've created generations of people who don't even know what those words mean that I just said. They don't even know the difference between quality and prestige, or I don't even know prestige, the brand that they hear the most in the music, the brand name that they hear dropped. I mean, that's the other thing. We used to talk about people who would name drop, and they would talk about famous people that they knew, prestigious or influential people that they knew. Now all the name dropping is brand names in all the songs and all the music and all the rap and so forth. And then, of course, it pervades in the films. I mean, one of the first things that people noticed about the pictures coming out from when they kidnapped Maduro was that he was wearing all Nike. That's one of the first things that people noticed was what he was wearing. So we're talking about people whose brains, Yani, are have been completely rotted with this consumerism and this materialism. And I don't know, I don't see. I mean, it would literally take a miracle for them to get out of that way of thinking. You can maybe do it on an individual basis, but on an individual basis, you're not going to change the culture. So I think that what needs to be done are things that can be done, but not by people in the West, unfortunately.
I just want to follow up on what Ustaz was saying, that it's not necessarily only people in the West that are under threat. Like, I agree that I think they are doomed. It's they're past the point of no return, but we also have to be on the lookout because there are many cases where these Western multinational corporations or these brands have also infected the minds of the young in the global South. And for example, in Japan in the 1970s, Nestle wanted to start selling coffee. They wanted to jump into the coffee market, but the coffee market in Japan was very, very unpopular. It was considered bitters, Western, rushed. You know, Japan is kind of synonymous with tea. You know, so it's a very, very hard task if you want to start convincing the Japanese people to start consuming coffee. I think at the time, Japan consumed 1/4 of what a country like the United States consumed, 0.5 kilograms of coffee per person per year. And they tried everything. They tried discounts, vending machines, giveaways, promotions. Nothing worked. The Japanese people still prefer tea. And this is what I was referring to earlier. They hired a child psychologist, and he told them that you need to create an emotional bond from early life because that lasts forever. So they started doing things like coffee flavored candy or coffee scented pencils to use in school, or advertising showing kids waking up to the smell of coffee. And within 30 years, it grew to a $30 billion market, and Japan was now consuming 4 times what it used to do by the 2000s, and today is in one of the its tea consumption is in steady decline, and its coffee consumption it just keeps getting higher and higher. So if they can do it with something as precious to the Japanese as tea and switch it for coffee, then I think we all need to have our guard up. But what we have, I think we have the tools, as Ustaz was saying, we have the tools and we have the resources because we have Islam. Of course, we are Muslims. Like I think Sister Nissa was saying, we are not NPCs or something. You know, we have Islam, and this is our identity for it. Is anything else? So there is we have this barrier, you know, that multinational corporations are not gonna touch at any point. You know.
Regarding that, I mean, there is, I don't know if you've seen that, and it has been going on for a few years now. These sports brands, like most notably Nike, are trying to kind of tap into the Muslim market as well. I feel so. They promote hijabi influencers, athletes, etc. Like, to what extent do you feel that they will be able to succeed in that? And I mean, I do agree with you that we don't as Muslims, we are validated by our Lord. We have the haram halal, like we have different concepts of worth, right? But do you think that these corporations will be able to spray the scent of Islam onto their brands and succeed in branding, so-called branding, the some of the symbols of our religion, not obviously the essence?
I honestly can't say it's an interesting question because now I'm thinking about it from a geopolitical angle, because we know that about the Middle East or the global South and Muslim countries in general are going to be like the global hub. They're going to be the host of basically all this Western capital, and it's going to be interesting to see how this corporate entity basically interacts with I don't know how it mutates or transforms to appeal to Muslims, or if Muslim culture and the Muslim identity could actually change it or fix it or cure it. Well, Allahu alam, yani, because it's extremely risky. I don't think it is something that they can twist or find loopholes. Like, I remember Starbucks CEO a while back tried to launch I think pride flags in the Middle East, something like that, and he got fired because there are certain things that, you know, there are certain things we do not, just like no red lines that you cannot basically cross. You cannot sell it to us, you know. Basically, some things are just beyond cost. You can try however hard you want to.
Yeah, just to continue with what Brother Abdurrahman was saying, I think the main thing here is, as I said in the beginning, the psychology of, the human psychology, where that's where these corporations are getting all the information that that tells them where our weaknesses are, where humans' weaknesses are, and that's how they target. Because at the end of the day, what they're looking for is profit, obviously. So as young people, young people are victims, of their nerves. Not well, everyone is, but especially young people, because of their inexperience, their low self-esteem, and so they are prone to, waswasa and all this, and they haven't developed well their identity, especially in the West. And this is where I'm coming to. So the hijab is an identity to them. It has become one of those, diversity threats, like how sexuality, how what is the other one that they, gender issues, all race. So is religiosity, or Islam is just one identity that they are using it to also market those segment, which is huge, especially in the West. And so I think I don't see it like someone from the South, from the global South. I don't really know what is so special about Nike's hijab, what do you call, outfit, except because I can find it way cheaper anywhere I go to, or any tailor can make it for me the way that I want it, with a cheaper at a cheaper cost. I think in the global South, the majority are conscious of cost or price. They are price sensitive. We are price sensitive, I feel, in the global South. And also, I don't think branding affects us as much. I would disagree with Brother Abdurrahman there, as much as it does in the West. He did say that, but it's really not even comparable. I mean, I remember I lived in back home for my childhood, and then I grew up to university, and then I went into university in the global South, and then I traveled to South Africa. And well, we'll come back to it when we go to the university part. But then the first thing that I noticed when I went there, coming from a country where education is free and it's all government controlled, there is no such thing as advertisement or whatever. It was really crazy how the students in the university were like very conscious of what they wear, how they look. I mean, I don't know why they are even coming to the university for. Is it really to get their degrees or to just show off their outfit? It's. I was that confused, and so I think global South is still, and I do consider South Africa as one of the global South, but the university that I was going to, that area was very influenced by Western culture. And so yeah, I just wanted to add that. But yeah, Islam is just one of the marketing the identities that the corporations are pushing, and I don't think it will be any effective in the global South as much as it would in the West.
Well, I appreciate those words of encouragement, Samira. That's nice to hear. Absolutely, absolutely. Let's see if Ustad is able to rejoin. I know he's having connection issues. Can you try now?
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. We can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, alhamdulillah. I'm sorry. As you know, again, I keep getting kicked out, so I'm not sure. We're on the topic of whether or not the branding and corporations are going to be successful in appropriating Islam in their branding. Is that the topic?
Correct. Yeah.
Well, I think that will depend entirely on the individual and the extent to which for the individual, Islam itself is decorative, and the extent to which for the individual, Islam is based primarily on external appearances, um, and sort of a show, and the extent to which their own Muslim identity is based upon the external appearances and so forth. Uh, and I think that it also depends on the extent to which you are primarily driven by social acceptance and by the acceptance basically of the kuffar and the systems of the kuffar, the power structure and so forth, in that you will feel validated when you get this sort of approval or this nod from the corporate sector and the big brand sector, uh, versus it means nothing to you. And I think that there will be a drastic difference in the success of these types of strategies, again, between Muslims in the West, in the diaspora, and Muslims in the Muslim world. I don't think it is going to fly very far for Muslims in the Muslim world, even if it happens, even if we're talking about companies in the Muslim world trying to do that. We have an example in Malaysia, for example, of a hijab brand that tried to be a very luxury brand called Duck Scarves, by a Malaysian sister who created this brand. The hijabs, the scarves were made in different parts of Asia, and I think primarily in China. And she was selling them as a very, very high luxury brand. But you're talking about a Muslim country in the Muslim world where you can buy hijabs, you can buy headscarves at any shop, at any souk, any bazaar for, $10, $5, $7, and you're trying to sell a hijab for, hundreds of dollars. And first of all, people don't have the money for that, and even the people who do have the money for that don't attach that kind of significance to the hijab. For them, the hijab isn't a fashion. The hijab is the obligation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's based upon the religion, not upon any sort of fashion or any sort of social acceptance or any of these things. And so I don't need it to cost hundreds of dollars in order for me to wear it. I don't need it to cost hundreds of dollars and be very fashionable and fancy in order for that to gain social acceptance, because I'm not doing it for social acceptance. I'm doing it for acceptance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I think that so that company has gone down. It's basically defunct at this point. They had several shops. She tried to do it in. She tried to franchise out and make partnerships in the Middle East, in Dubai, in Qatar, and so on. And of course, they've got their own. Now, these are people who do care a lot about, in the Gulf, in the Khalij, they do care a lot about the luxury branding and so forth. But they've already got their own. And the reason that they're able to do that is because they have tremendous excess wealth in the first place. So if you're trying to sell to the broader Muslim world, well, we don't have that kind of money, and we also don't need that validation in terms of the material prestige of this or that item. And nobody cares whether or not Nike thinks it's okay that a hijabi plays sports or anything. No one in the Muslim world cares. It's very normal. In the Muslim world, you've got Muslim women who are athletes and who are involved in athletics and sports, and riding around on motorcycles and skateboards and roller skates. All of this is perfectly normal in the Muslim world, and it's not strange to us, and we're not looking for any kind of acceptance. So it doesn't mean anything to us in the Muslim world. So it may play out in the West, but that's simply because the state of Islam for many Muslims in the West is already on a kind of life support system, and it's already quite fragile, and it's already quite based upon external validation, external appearances, and very, very shallow identity markers, rather than based upon a real deep, ingrained commitment and understanding of the deen. So if you're coming from a place like that, then this sort of branding is going to affect you the same way that it would affect any other so-called minority group that is being catered to by corporations. So It depends entirely on the individual and their own relationship with Islam, the extent to which a strategy like this would work, in my opinion.
Thank you, Stan. Brother Kareem, I saw your hand raised. Would you like to add a few words?
I just wanted to add, like, I think due to the understanding of the geopolitical, the future or the trajectory that we are at, and if we do believe that, inshallah, the region of the Sham and Gulf and so on are going to be the center of the global economy in one sense or another, the export of this soft power will be through the brands trying to acclimatize to this reality, right? So I do believe that the brands will start propagating and we already see hints of this, right? Like there is already this normalization of the Arab culture, of the, like Arab lifestyle and these different things that are being promoted and made like appealing to people around the world. And I do believe it will take on even in the, advertising and marketing and branding and so on more and more, right? Like, Dubai chocolate is just step one, step two, Tommy Hilfiger hijab, right? So I do believe that brands will try to ride on that, and it will just be a showcase of the increasing soft power of the countries that we are speaking of, right? And another thing is that do people confuse culture with religion, which we have seen like in the past 20, 30 years, right? Like numerous examples of that. So a part of increasing the propagation of the region will be 100% tied to Islamic propagation, because it is intertwined with our lives 100%. But for them, like, they will not care about promoting Islam, they will care about promoting the soft power of the region, but inadvertently they will have to do it with Islam, right? So I do believe that some sort of increase of Islamic and slash Arabic culture in advertising and branding will be the normal in the next decade, for example, right? And what follows, of course.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. However, I kind of have to move on to the next chapter. The problem is I ask all of these questions knowing that we cannot really spend only 10-15 minutes answering them, and then I'm anxious about finishing on time. So okay, thank you for the insights about this particular topic. The next one, chapter 4, deals with the influence of corporations on academia. We did kind of talk about this a little bit in the previous meeting 2 weeks ago, where we discussed corporate presence in schools. So I thought maybe today we could discuss how it is manifested in higher education, like in academia. There were a few examples mentioned by the author, where she kind of demonstrated that some research projects were shut down because the results were not really aligned with what the donors, the sponsors wanted. And I'm not really following that particularly closely. It's been a while since I was a university student. But I mean, when it comes to the state of academia today, maybe Kareem and Samira are probably the most qualified to talk about that. Do you think that it has been completely captured by the corporate power, or is it still relatively independent from the funding, necessary to conduct research?
Ladies first, please, Sister Samira.
Okay. Right. So regarding, well, it depends because maybe rarely Kareem would talk about that the sponsorships in the West. However, here where I am working in the Middle East, there isn't such thing as sponsorship or grants, especially research grants, are highly regulated here. For example, I can't even apply for any grant outside the country for funds from outside the country unless that specific grant is approved by the government. So here it's completely different. That's why I cannot speak for this kind of. But I do get what the writer is saying. They will have unduly influence on the research for sure if you let corporations fund it, because their aim is always going to be profit. So in that case, they would want, obviously, for you to, the reason why they're doing the research in the first place is for for them to market it better, saying that, this university has endorsed it, and they found out that it is effective and all this. Imagine if that product does not have doesn't add any value, and you doing your research and being in academia, you stand by the ethics, and you have to obviously have to follow all the ethics, and follow all the rigorous scientific methodology, and prove that it doesn't add any value, whatever the product it is that you're testing. Imagine how that would influence, and obviously they will never allow it to be published. Now that's the conflict, where the conflict comes, where I, as a researcher, would like to publish my work that I have done over the years, or over on this product, and to disseminate the information that I found out. And then here you have a corporation that is does not, the bottom line or its interest is the profit. So there is a conflict there, and that I can see is problematic when we get. But as I said, the solution right here where I am is that whatever research is going to be done, the government, if it's going to be funded, it either has to be funded by the government, or the grant must be approved by the government, from wherever it is coming.
Thank you, Samira. Brother Kareem, go ahead, please.
Bismillah. So again, back to the point that Ustaz Shahid was making about the system as a whole, right? Like already, you are like, who is making the syllabus, right? Who is making the people who will be the academics are usually people that are brought up by the system. So already they are conditioned into some way of thinking, into some way of approaching. So already you will have a little, or a small amount of people who will actually try to somehow go against something. So that's the first step, right? When you get people who, like in the end, maybe the public universities are not so, and again, I have to defend, where I'm at. I'm in Eastern Europe, so it's completely different to Western Europe, right? So here we are completely disassociated from the corporate sector. No, but like, not joking, still there is, even though the university itself is not, so reliant on private funding, the government that is, giving you the money is still reliant on private funding, right? So either you have a step in between of this government being there or not, right? And in a sense, it's just like this facade, right? As we understand from all of the videos that Ustaz has made, and from the realities at play. So, like, I personally, in my research and so on, I feel kind of freedom. Like, I have never been told, you cannot do this or that. It's usually when you cannot do something, it's just politically, sensitive topics rather than commercially sensitive topics, right? But again, that's because I'm in, doing like economic analysis and so on. So it's very difficult for example, like the examples that she gave were in the pharma, medical, and there, of course, he will get much bigger backlash, right? And much, stranger, like stricter conditions regarding the private sector and their profitability in the big pharma, right? Or if you did in some maybe like communications field, or then there might be again some pushback from the private sector, right? I personally do not experience that too much, because like doing a projection of some economic variables is really not gonna bother some corporation too much. Yeah? So in my personal experience, and like not even around me have I seen any professors getting sacked, for having some opinion about some company, but it usually was having some opinion about Russia, or having some opinion about COVID, or whatever, these kind of things, right? That were part of some sort of debate and with polarized spectrums. Yeah, but again, like when you create a system that is basically everyone is trying to keep on grinding to achieve a bigger, higher position in the private sector, you will necessarily like create individuals that they will have this conflict of interest, where they will need to publish something to be included in the circles where they want to see themselves, right? And you have already conditioned them for the past 10 years to that you want to reach this place, right? And the only way you can reach this place is if you cater to their demands somehow, right? So even though you might not like consciously be doing it, there is this subconscious effect that basically you need to go with the flow so that you can achieve what you have been promised, right? And I do believe, and again, it's in the government, right? Like everybody's trying to secure some form after they, their term ends. They want to sit on the board of some, central bank or of some be external consultants or whatever. And of course, you cannot go too much against, the narrative or the frameworks that are, propagandized if you want to secure your seat, right? So I do not think that there are many cases of individuals going against it, because it basically means that you have unconditioned yourself from the whole, education system, right? To be a person that is willing to somehow stand for what is right, stand for what is true. But here, you usually have people whose only aim is to secure their future in one way or another. And the only way you can secure is if you go with the flow. So, there's not much initiative from the people to go against the system and its narratives, right?
That's well said, brother. Just one short comment. I thought you guys from the Czech Republic get offended when we call you Eastern European. So what happened with that?
It's just people in Prague,
You like to be called Westerners or Central Europeans or whatever. Okay.
Prague is Western. The rest of Czech Republic is Eastern.
Oh, that's chauvinism. That's disgusting. It's disgusting to hear. Anyway, I mean, Sal, would you like to comment on this?
Yeah, I mean, you have to, again, like Brother Kareem was saying, and I was talking about earlier, you have to put it all in the context of what's going on socioeconomically and politically in the society. I haven't, I don't have a whole lot of experience or insight into universities currently in the West, excuse me, but just in principle, why is the funding not being provided by the state in the first place? The funding gets cut so that it can be provided by the private sector. This is part of neoliberalism. It's part of the hollowing out. And this is actually, I think this is something that that Naomi Klein talks about in her other book, The Shock Doctrine. Is this hollowing out of the state and its institutions and its functions and delivering them over basically to the private sector for their use. So you have to look, first of all, why, the beginning question isn't, is it good or bad for corporations to be providing funding to institutions of higher learning? The question is, why do they need the money in the first place? Why are they coming up short in their budgets that they need this in the first place? And why isn't the state providing that? Because the state, at least in theory, has a social contract. There's a contract for what they're supposed to be doing and why, which is supposed to be for the social good, for the benefit of the society at large. And when you're having funding coming from the private sector, you're having funding coming from corporations whose entire purpose is the service of shareholder value, shareholder dividends, profit. There's no social contract whatsoever. Their only contract is to their shareholders and to the delivery of dividends and so on, and higher share prices. So you already know from the beginning that they have ulterior motives for why they're doing anything in terms of funding universities or university departments or research or what have you. You already know that they have an ulterior motive. There's no question about it. They must have an ulterior motive. And their ulterior motive isn't even hidden. It's not even secret. It's in their corporate constitutions, their corporate contracts. So you already know what they're doing it for. So, I mean, if you look at what a university is supposed to be, right? Like if you look classically at what the function of universities were, say in Islam, or what you can call universities, the purpose wasn't for certification. It wasn't for economic advancement. It wasn't for the rich. It wasn't for the benefit of the power structure. It was for the benefit of society. Ta'lim and tazkiyah. It was for the purpose of making of the transmission of knowledge, so that the population as a whole could be elevated as a whole through the appearance of greater and greater levels of knowledge and people with expertise in various areas that were of benefit to the society. And in theory, that could translate to any state that has a social contract with the population funding universities, because again, theoretically, you're supposed to want your population to be educated. You're supposed to want your population to have expertise, to have knowledge, and to elevate the overall level of education and knowledge and understanding in your society, in theory. But when you're now handing over responsibility for what gets funded in terms of research and in terms of development and so on,
to the private sector, the benefit of the population is cut completely out of that scenario. They have nothing to do with it, whether it's good or bad for society. That has nothing to do with it. The whole purpose of their funding is going to be to generate profits for their shareholders. That's their whole sole prime objective. That's their prime directive that they have to serve at all times. So if they're funding universities, it's only for this purpose, and that should be clearly understood. So I'm not saying that no good can come out of it, but it certainly is not an ideal situation, and a great deal of harm is inevitably going to come out of it.
I think just got a few more comments about this. I think that it does depend on the field. Like for example, in humanities, you have what Kareem talked about. This self-censorship. So that some topics you just do not want to touch, you don't want to approach them if you want to be successful. But that's not really about corporate influence. This is just about the propaganda of the system you live in. But in terms of medical research, pharmaceutical, etc., that's really really problematic. I mean, I've been following some professionals, on social media recently, and what they're saying at least is that there are efforts to kind of push certain narratives within this space to to essentially push back against some standard medical procedures, pills and whatnot. Okay, and I think one of the outcomes of that is how what's this guy named Kennedy, right? The health secretary or something in the US, how he approaches healthcare in the United States of America. So I do think that in that sphere, corporate influence is probably the most insidious, the most harmful, and like in the field of humanities, I don't know, economics, something like that. Essentially, who cares? Because we already are primed to believe in certain things and act in a certain way. But yeah, so that's one thing that I really think we should probably deal with. It should be on top of our list, right? But I'm not, remotely qualified to give detailed takes about that or explanations. But I feel that in 2026, and the book, I don't know, it was written early 2000s. It is a much bigger issue than when Naomi Klein wrote about it. So yeah, I mean, I hope that the countries of the global south will not succumb to that corporate pressure, at least in the medical field. Topic. We could move on to chapter 5, which kind of aligns well with chapter 3. It has to do with identity politics and how that also has been co-opted by corporate power. So the author discusses how all those movements back in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s have essentially been hijacked by corporations. So think of the LGBTQ movement, the feminist movement, etc., where companies figured out that okay, our new consumers care about these things. We should care about them too, and they started creating brands, celebrating so-called heroes of these movements, etc. And the author feels that the appeal has been lost because, as Ustad mentioned earlier, you had many proponents, many influencers who sold out, who became shills, and that essentially the movements kind of died out and didn't really achieve much. So what is the interplay between identity politics and branding, and how can a genuine movement resist selling out, essentially?
Well, in my opinion, a movement that is genuine and grassroots and deeply felt and understood by the people who have started that movement, it cannot be hijacked. and that this is similar to what we were talking about with regards to the branding and the marketing to Muslims, in that if your sense of identity is actually quite superficial and quite shallow, then it's ripe for being hijacked, and it's because you're depending exclusively upon superficial markers, and basically it is in and of itself a form of branding. We are X community, and this is what we wear, and this is what we drink, and this is what we listen to. These are our fashions. These are the kind of cars we drive. This is the kind of food we eat, and so on. If that's the totality of what your culture means to you, then you have never really gotten to the root of your own culture and the root of your own community, and it's more or less performative. So if your community or your identity is basically performative, then it's ripe for hijacking. It's ripe for marketing and branding, and then it becomes something that can be dictated to you by marketing itself. So it begins with them trying to cater to you because of certain trends that they see within your community, certain characteristics or traits, or even fashions and what have you, likes and dislikes within your community, within your movement, within the people who share your identity. The marketers will notice that. They'll notice these aspects and these traits, and then they'll start to produce goods that cater to you. And then once you start using those as the way that you identify yourself, the way that you solidify and announce your identity to the public at large, then eventually, of course, the company can start to dictate to you what you are and what you wear and how you are, and start to control your sense of your own identity. But again, this is only possible when your actual sense of yourself and your sense of your community, your sense of identity, is already very shallow and superficial. Otherwise, that can't happen. It will hit a brick wall the moment they start trying to feed you something that does not represent you. And also, again, it has to be based on a relatively shallow and performative sense of identity, in that you are looking for social acknowledgement. Whereas if you are really deeply rooted in your identity, whatever that is, obviously for Muslims it's a bit different, but for people generally, if you are deeply rooted in your identity, you have knowledge of it, you have knowledge of your culture, knowledge of your history, knowledge of your past, knowledge of your civilization that you came from, and so on, then this cannot be hijacked and it can't be taken away from you. And it's not something that you are going to be looking for social validation about. You're not looking for social acceptance because you are already so immersed in your own community and immersed in your own culture that outside opinion doesn't really have any currency with you. So I think that, yes, this is something that took off very much in the West, took off very much in America, because part of being an American is to be without an identity, really, and to let your identity be dictated by the power structure, by the corporations, by the millionaires and billionaires who write your songs and write your movies and write your books and tell you what to believe. So I think that there are many aspects of what Naomi Klein is talking about that are absolutely not universal to the human experience. They are very unique and very peculiar to the West, and it's based on a general emptiness that people in the West suffer from, that has been inflicted upon the people of the West by their own so-called civilization, which, as I've said many times in my talks, their civilization, so-called, has betrayed them extremely deeply and ruthlessly, and left them really empty, and left them not able to define their own identities. And so they're very open to and happy about it when the power structure assigns them an identity and how identity is supposed to be expressed. But I don't think that plays as well around the rest of the world.
To add to that, I mean, obviously, I cannot really, speak with any degree of, high authority, but it is really sad to see, looking, at the Black community. I mean, the African American community now in the US. I mean, if you think about it, in the past, they had very well outspoken activists, like Malcolm X, even like athletes, Ali, right? People with principles, who did not sell out, who stood for what they believed. And I recently saw an interview where Malcolm X was talking about how you never see clowns, for the lack of a better word, like celebrities, musicians, rappers, basketball players, etc. You never see those people representing, let's say, the white community, white America, where I feel that to a lot of extent the project there was to impose these people as role models, as some kind of heroes to the black community, and probably the Hispanic community as well. It's similar. I can't really speak for sure. Uh, to kind of replace them. And now when I hear, for example, LeBron James talk about black struggle, it sounds empty. There's really no meaning to it. But I feel that that movement has been hijacked by these extremely wealthy, influential shills for the power structure. And honestly, like I think it's a great lesson to any movement outside of the US, to learn and to pay attention who their role models and leaders are. Because I mean, if you just let it be, if you just mindlessly follow some kind of celebrity that's been imposed on you, then you don't have a movement really. I mean, it's meaningless. Meaningless.
Yes, and I think though, can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, all right. It's still showing on my screen that I'm muted, but what Malcolm X, our Mukhtar, said is absolutely true. It was true in his day, and even in the generations prior to his saying that, in the 50s and the 40s and so on, and even in the 70s. But what we've seen, and this is worth noting, I think, that this is the case now across all racial demographics. What he described about the African American situation at that time in the 1960s, that has now become the situation across all racial demographics. Everyone's hero is either in sports or in music or an actor. They're all performers now. Now the number one top political commentators are comedians. The people that people turn to for their political commentary, their social commentary, they're not writers, they're not authors, they're not intellectuals, they're not scholars, they're comedians, they're stand-up comedians. Everyone wants to know what this or that celebrity says about politics. Everyone wants to know what this or that singer or performer says about Trump, says about politics, says about government. And so what I'm saying is that the tactic that was used in the time of Malcolm X, rahimahullah, in the African American community to marginalize them and to be dismissive of their concerns and their struggles, that has now crossed all racial demographics. Now the entire population at large is marginalized. Their struggles and what they face, all of them are marginalized now. And now we have assigned for you, as Brother Malcolm said, we've assigned for you all of the clowns and the comedians and the performers and the dancers and the people who play sports and whatnot. Now those are your idols. Now those are also your spokespeople. Now those are your leaders. Now those are your role models. Now this is for everybody. Now what applied to one oppressed racial demographic in the 1960s now applies to the entire population. I think that's worth taking note of.
Inshallah, that's a brilliant take. Absolutely. And now that I think about it, I see the pattern here as well. I mean, outside of the US, the popularity of the stand-up comedians, of people who quote unquote criticize the system. People see them and turn to them for some kind of meaning in the world. I mean, partly because the politicians are complete buffoons, so you don't even want to listen to them, and the people you turn to make jokes about it. So even though you're miserable, you can't pay rent, you can't buy groceries, at least you have that haha moment. You get to criticize the leaders, the powers that are that are ruling you. And it's kind of the I don't want to say like healing, but it feels like that to many people. It heals their souls. If they cannot change their condition, at least they can make fun of the tyrants that rule them. It's a very interesting phenomenon now that I think about it.
Yes, no, but the thing is, it's It's healing in the same way that the current modern pharmaceutical industry heals. They never heal anything. They never cure anything. They just help you live with it. And it's just a temporary painkiller. It's just a laughing gas. It's just an anesthetic to numb the pain that you're feeling. And then the other thing about it is these celebrities, they are assigned to you as your heroes and your spokespeople and your leaders, not only because they are unserious people and are not actually leading any sort of a movement, they're not actually leading anything. They are part and parcel of the power structure. Every single one of them, every single one of these people who's supposed to be a spokesperson for you isn't on the ground. They're not grassroots. They're all multimillionaires, if not billionaires. They're all part of the class, of the ruling class. They're all part of the power structure. And they don't represent you, but they're assigned as if they represent you, as if they are a normal, ordinary person just like you, because they talk in the language that's familiar and that's casual and that's informal. And as you said, it makes you laugh. And they say the things that you can't say. But one of the reasons that they can even say the things that they're saying is precisely because they're getting paid tens of millions of dollars to say it by the very power structure that they're criticizing. I mean, the level of the hypocrisy, the level of delusion that the population must be feeling, and that the level of cognitive dissonance that the population must be feeling, the only thing that can make them feel better is exactly what you're talking about. Is this anesthetic of laughter, this anesthetic of watching sports achievement, or watching a film, or watching or listening to a song, or what have you. You're being anesthetized at the very moment that you're also being insulted. It's really breathtaking.
Yeah, and it's a very clever ruse to kind of prevent you from making any meaningful change, right? Absolutely. Sister Nisa, you'd like to add a few words? Go ahead, please.
Assalamualaikum. Thank you so much for leading me up at the last minute. I really appreciate it. I just want to add on something that annoys me tremendously is the use of comedians and that culture of mocking serious issues. I mean, in South Africa, we have the same thing where we mock our politicians, we mock everything, we mock our high crime rates even, you know, and that is a problem, because what that means is when we see it as humorous because we believe that we can't actually change it, it means we're not going to change it. If we don't see it as a serious issue, we're never going to change it. And that is exactly what they want us to do, is just mock and let it go, move on, and board up your windows to make sure criminals don't get in your house. You know what I mean? So when it comes to politicians, for me specifically right now, the one that gets on my nerves is Trevor Noah. When he was an up-and-coming comedian and he was, you know, doing his bits and that, his narrative is completely changed to when he became a host on The Daily Show. You know, you could see the shift in his narrative, and that shows you how they are placed there to disseminate the propaganda and the narratives that they want you to believe of themselves, at the same time making light of it and not taking the issue serious. And that all comes down to the fact that if you don't take it serious, you are never going to fix what the problem is. So that annoys me when I see, you know, being mocked. Sometimes I also laugh at certain things, but the real serious issues, crime stats, incorrect narratives, you know, those type of things, it's not a laughing matter. It is serious issues. So, and a lot of people get their information from comedians, which is so sad, and it's stupid, if you ask me. I don't see why you would want to get serious matters from a person who's a self-professed clown. That's what they are. They're there to entertain. That's all they do. So, yeah, that's my 2 cents about the matter.
Yes, sister. And the other thing about it is, these are people, okay, we laugh. You and I, regular people, we laugh to keep ourselves from crying. We laugh because we're in the situation and there's nothing we can do about it. We laugh to keep ourselves from crying, but they're laughing all the way to the bank. It's a completely different thing. This is gallows humor when you're the executioner, not when you're on the gallows and about to be hung or about to be hanged. This is the executioner laughing and making jokes about the fact that you're being hanged when he can do something about it. We're talking about, like I said, multimillionaires who can do something about the things that they're criticizing, who can do something more than tell jokes, more than tweet, more than put out videos, more than put out, I don't know, some kind of a, you know, one verse that's deemed critical of the government or of the system. in a song, in one song. They can do more than that. They're multimillionaires. Some of them, as I said, are literally billionaires. They're not in our position. They're not in our shoes. You know, but we turn to them to represent us, or we're told to turn to them to represent us. When you're talking about like what Malcolm X was talking about, the leaders that he was talking about who were not entertainers, he was talking about scholars. He was talking about actual leaders on the ground. He was talking about professors and intellectuals and authors, thinkers that you were not supposed to have as your leaders if you were African American in the 1960s. Now we're talking about leaders who are multimillionaire, shill, sellouts, complete features of the power structure, and we're supposed to pretend that they represent us and think that they're laughing with us and not laughing at us. It's insulting. As I said, you're being anesthetized at the same moment that they're insulting you.
I think the issue really stems from people who really have no sense of independent thinking in any shape or form. Specifically because from a very young age, as we said, these corporations are entering the schools, they're targeting children. From a very young age, it is there's a deliberate process of making sure that you don't actually think for yourself, while simultaneously having you believe that you're actually an independent thinker. You are making these choices, or these thoughts are yours, when you are really just repeating someone else's, and that person was already repeating, like what Ustaz has been saying for a while, the narrative shelf, basically. And so if it's not a comedian, it's maybe a YouTuber, this content creator, or this news anchor, or this politician, or this guy or that guy, because the population cannot think for itself, is just waiting for someone to come along and provide all the solutions and just lay it out for them, because they are incapable of even articulating their criticisms. And comedians sort of offer this channel where they articulate what the so-called criticisms of the system, but in a laughing manner. I even see people saying, our comedians are know more than our politicians, when really they're all clowns and they're all actors, they're all hired, but each one has a different role. And I think this your vulnerability to such thing is all about basically, like Ustaz said, what Islam is to you. And this is where epistemology becomes important. What Islam is to you. Is Islam this superstitious thing that you believe in personally, something that you keep to yourself at home? Or is it this lens that you see the world through? It's the truth. It is something that is in the back of your mind in every part of your day, in every action you take, in whatever your field or your expertise is, whether you're in school or you're an academic, whether on all fields, really, to ensure that, for example, when you split the atom, you're not using it to wipe out entire cities. When you invent TNT, you're not naming a peace prize after yourself. This is where morals and ethics become extremely important. Because as we're seeing, what does it say about society where the minds of children is just an empty box where you put in things? Every child is a human asset. It's a future cash flow. You're already from a very young age, you're just planting all these things in him with the sole purpose of making him just a liquid asset, basically, something you can a future investment. It is very, very appalling, honestly.
Right. I will just add. Maybe I'm not even adding. I'm just continuing to what you have all been saying. It goes back to where the equation has changed. Instead of looking at the value, at the product, now it's about brands, and not product. That equation has been applied everywhere. So it's not about the seriousness of the matter. It's not about the content. It's all about the brand or the entertainment or the posturing. All these things that don't matter are the ones that are being paid. So we are paying, or we are paying attention as people in general. I'm talking about paying more attention to the trivial things, which is exactly what the equation is: the brands, not the product. So that equation is still going in each and every sector, in each and every aspect of our lives, and so it has trivialized everything. and it pays. I think it was, I don't know where it was, that we were talking about football, how sports, I think it was in a documentary that I saw, that how much they pay, entertainers in general. They are being paid in millions, while the poor guy who is doing something in academics or something that would really change the real lives of people or societies is really not being valued. It's not even respected. How many students respect their teachers who are teaching them? Oh yeah, even that. Even teachers themselves don't take themselves seriously at this point, because they have to entertain. For the students to listen to them, they have to entertain. So everything has become about entertainment, which is really sad. But yeah, it's something that we need to consider and to be careful of.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, when you think about it, even more today than 20, 30 years ago with the internet, there is really no ad-free space anymore. At least not in what we call the developed world. And with that, I suppose that's the conclusion of part one. There's no space for freedom from the corporations that dominate millions of lives, billions of lives, I should say. We are kind of running out of time. Probably we exceeded the time limit, but it was quite an interesting discussion. Thank you all for coming. Thank you the speakers for your brilliant insights as always. So we finished part one. Inshallah, in 2 weeks we will talk about part two. I still have to see how much we're going to cover. Probably the first 2 chapters, but inshallah I will inform you about that soon. So yeah, thank you once again. Thank you for coming, and talk to you soon. Assalamu alaikum.